Today, we're breaking down the entire SRA specification for FLK2 of SQE1. In a few minutes, here's everything you need to know about what this part of the exam really covers. FLK2 is all about your advanced legal knowledge in property, wills, trusts, land, solicitors' accounts, criminal liability, and criminal practice. Think of it as the second half of the legal knowledge you need to function as a solicitor. We start with property law and practice. You need to understand how freehold and leasehold transactions work from start to finish. That means investigating title, whether the land is registered or unregistered, reading land registry documents, checking an epitome of title, spotting problems, and reporting them to the client. You also need the purpose of searches and inquiries, and how they fit into the Law Society's conveyancing protocol. Finance plays a big role. You must know sources of funding, the different types of mortgage, what lenders require, and why solicitors issue certificates of title. From contracts to completion, you need the conditions of sale, how deposits are held, who carries the risk, when VAT applies, how contracts are exchanged, and what happens if completion is delayed, including damages, compensation, notices to complete, and rescission. Leasehold practice has its own core topics. You need the structure of a lease, repair, insurance, alterations, use, planning, rent and reviews, alienation, and break clauses, and the code for leasing business premises. You must know the steps for granting a lease or underlease, assigning a lease, obtaining licenses to assign or underlet. That includes investigating title, carrying out searches, drafting and completing documents, understanding privity of contract, and recognizing when an authorized guarantee agreement is required. You will also be assessed on remedies for breach, such as forfeiture, commercial rent recovery, damages, and Jervis versus Harris clauses. Finally, you must understand how a lease can end and how security of tenure works under the Landlord and Tenant Act 1954, including renewals, opposition grounds, and compensation. Planning law also appears in summary form. You must know what counts as development, what does not need planning permission, the role of building regulations, enforcement powers, and time limits. Property taxation is also included, stamp duty, land tax and its Welsh equivalent, VAT and property transactions, capital gains tax, and private residence relief. Next is wills and the administration of estates. You need to understand how wills become valid, the formality is required, what happens when wills are altered or revoked, and how marriage or divorce affects them. You will cover executives, codicils, the interpretation of gifts, when gifts fail, and how intestacy works under the Administration of Estates Act 1925. You must also know which assets pass outside the estate, such as joint property or pension benefits. In probate practice, you will be tested on grant of representation, when they are needed, the application process, value in assets, funding inheritance tax, and the duties and liabilities of personal representatives when administering an estate. You must also know claims under the Inheritance Act 1975 and all relevant inheritance tax rules, including lifetime transfers, exceptions, reliefs, and the tax position of both the personal representatives and beneficiaries.
Solicitor's accounts is another essential element. You must understand what client money is, when it must be paid into a client account, the rules on interest, withdrawals, accounting entries, and reconciliations. You also need the rules on avoiding improper banking facilities, operating joint or third-party managed accounts, and the requirement to keep accurate and up-to-date financial records. Any breach must be corrected promptly, and you must know how accountants' reports and record-keeping obligations work. Land law forms the backbone of FLK2. You must know the nature of land, how legal estates and interests are created and transferred, how third-party rights are protected, and the difference between registered and unregistered title. This includes overriding interests, land charges, co-ownership, joint tenancy versus tenancy in common, severance and dispute resolution under the Trusts of Land and Appointment of Trustees Act. You must understand easements, covenants, mortgages, leases, privity, enforceability, and remedies for breach, as well as how leases are terminated. Trusts law also features heavily. You must know how express trusts are created, the three certainties, formalities, constitution, and the exceptions to the rule that equity will not assist the volunteer. Beneficial interests can be fixed, discretionary, vested or contingent, and the rule in Saunders v. Vautier may apply. You need the differences between charitable and non-charitable purpose trusts, the nature of resulting trusts, constructive trusts of the family home, and proprietary estoppel. You must understand fiduciary duties, trustee powers, investment obligations, liability for breach, and equitable remedies, including tracing.
Criminal liability assesses your knowledge of specialized offenses such as assault, ABH, GBH, murder, manslaughter, theft, robbery, burglary, fraud, and criminal damage. You must know the actus reus and mens rea for each offense, the general defenses such as intoxication and self-defense, the partial defenses of loss of control and diminished responsibility, and liability for attempts and accomplices. Finally, criminal practice focuses on client advice at the police station, suspects' rights, PACE procedures, identification, and vulnerable clients. You'll be expected to know bail, magistrates' court procedure, plea before venue, allocation between courts, case management, disclosure, and rules on admitting or excluding evidence, including Turnbull guidance, hearsay, confessions, bad character, and the powers under Section 78 of PACE. You must understand the stages of trial, sentencing guidelines, mitigation, custodial and non-custodial options, Newton hearings, and appeals from both Magistrates' Court and Crown Court. Youth Court procedure is also included, along with Welsh language considerations in criminal proceedings. That's FLK2 in a nutshell: property, estates, trusts, accounts, land, crime, and criminal practice. A huge syllabus, but now you know the full map.
If after all this you feel like you need a study planner, Dr. Yannis has your back. Scan the QR code on the screen for access to our free digital study planner for SQE1.